Oops, wrong one. There we go. Hello again. Sorry, we decided to try popping this over onto the main channel just because it didn't seem like the side channel was getting any notifications. Maybe as it gets more subscribers, we'll have a bigger group over there and we'll stream things live there. But for now, we'll stream from over here. Hello and welcome back to Fanfic Friday, the event of my nightmares. Hello, Elfin, Jeff, Alexel, Lobsel, Daniel, Keyblade Master. I think that's everybody. Hello. If you've never popped into this is Fanfic Friday, an event where I read aloud fanfics I wrote as a teenager and put silly, goofy pictures to, and we all cringe in horror at the ridiculousness of the plots and the everything. Oh my god. Now, I always open these up by saying, oh man, guys, this one's real bad. But guys, this one's really bad. This is a continuation of the Silent Hill story that I've read in the past. Those episodes are on the second channel, link in the description. And this one just loses the plot entirely. Like, I just ramble for a good 10,000 words. It's bad. So, without further ado, here is chapter 4. Oh my god, which opens up with, of course, a Lorena Mechanic quote from the song Skellig, obviously. Many a year was I perched out upon the sea, the waves would wash my tears, the wind my memory. Which has nothing to do with anything. It's not going to have anything to do with the story. I had a thing for putting quotes at the top of stories. It was like the big thing to do at that point in fandom, and I thought it made my stories look like really cool. All right. We are ready. Jimmy Stone and George Roston each stood in one of the inner circles of the cult symbol, which had been painted upon the warehouse floor with the blood and entrails of monsters. In the third circle sat a box from which wafted a horribly foul odor. In George's hand was a bloody ceremonial dagger. In Jimmy's hand, a blood-crusted spear. The two cultists raised their arms as one, chanting darkest to the sky as the ground began to quake. Chanting darkest to the sky as the ground began to quake. Far off, beneath the ground, deep within the shadows, a head rose in the darkness. Okay, that was just a little intro, I guess, and this is the beginning of the story. This is all in italics because it is a dream. Gotta start with a dream sequence. Every step he took squelched and squished on the floor as Henry Townshend barreled across blood-covered tile running for his life. He'd left Eileen back at the elevator with his gun to protect her, but now he was the one in need. A deep, twisted laugh echoed all around, and Henry's heartbeat spiked. Breathing erratically, the man forced himself to keep running ever onward. A gunshot rang through the area, and Henry gasped, but it didn't hit him. Run, keep going, going. There it was, a hole, his salvation. The man felt his fingers tremble as relief soared through him. Where do you think you're going? Oh my God. Suddenly, an arm was wrapped around his waist, and Henry let out a gasp as his feet were knocked out from under him. A whisper tickled his ear as he was held to the man's chest. Henry. Walter was grinning against his earlobe. Did you really think you could escape? I hope you heard those dots that were in there. I really tried to, get into it. The lips opened and teeth descended on his pale This is such a weird way to write that. The lips opened and teeth descended on his pale skin, earning a sharp cry from the victim. Walter! Nibbling touches moved from his ear, tugging and pulling to his neck as Henry's temperature rose considerably. Red-faced and breathing heavily, the man felt his eyes roll back as Walter's breath rushed over his skin. What's he doing, panting? Now that I've caught you, I think I'll teach you a lesson, Henry. Henry! Bedsheets were tossed about in a flurry as Henry's body snapped up. Glancing around, he tried to figure out where he was, who he was, and what was going on as footsteps came from the hallway. Oh, that's right. He was Henry Townshend, he was in bed, and was about to be in trouble if he didn't think of something before Eileen Galvin entered his room. Thankfully, his fast reflexes had him reaching out and grabbing a pillow, yanking it onto his lap before his neighbor could enter his bedroom. Oh, good God. The woman paused in the doorway, eyebrow cocked. You okay? It's bad phrasing. Hair ruffled, cheeks pink, breathing irregular, and clutching the pillow in his lap like it was a life raft in a storm, Henry nodded vigorously. I'm fine. She stared, unconvinced. What were you doing? Sleeping? Which was not a lie. The woman decided to let it drop and held up her hands. Okay, I was just checking on you. You never showed up this morning and you didn't answer the door, so I was worried. That made Henry wonder. How'd you get in? Eileen smirked. How do you think? She nodded behind her, and suddenly Walter Sullivan was standing in the doorway with her. Oh my God. Oh, Henry's pink cheeks grew pinker, and Eileen noticed, puzzled. Henry ignored her confusion and grabbed another pillow, piling it on top of the first for good measure. Good morning, the man muttered. Walter simply nodded as Eileen huffed. You didn't say good morning to me. Playfully, he smirked to her. He wasn't yelling at me and waking me up. The woman simply stuck her tongue out at him, arms crossed, and then walked away down the hall. Well, we're going to head out. Should we wait for you? Henry knew the answer, whether he wanted to join Eileen's group or not. Can't today. Okay, see you later. He heard the door shut. Oh, God. Hello, folks joining us. Welcome to the nightmare. Bob has also joined us. Are you coming up, Bob? Come on. He's staring at me. He's judging me. Very, very judging eyes right now. Walter turned and addressed him. Where are they going? Henry heard his deep voice and felt dread slip down his throat. Well, this was a problem. Slowly, Henry lifted his head to look at the man leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed, his broad shoulders scrunched, hair falling ever so gently over one eye. He was as handsome as ever, and his already deep baritone was made even more sultry by morning exhaustion. I'm exhausted, and we've only just started this story, Bob. You gonna help me out? Say, I don't approve of this. I didn't agree to any of this, and I would like to be put down. Please put me down. Hi, Bob. Can you say hi? Say, please let me go. But I need the comfort, Bob. I'm struggling very hard right now. You gotta help me out. There you go. This is not helping my predicament. Come on, Henry. Words, sentences are made of words. They're taking little Walter on a picnic in the woods. Walter seemed to scowl a little at the statement. Henry frowned. Did you want to go? The taller man glanced up, then shook his head, leaving to go to his room. Henry waited a full 10 seconds before heaving a sigh of relief. Somehow he'd made it out of that one with his pride intact. The man leapt up to rush to the bathroom before someone else came in order to take a very, very cold shower. Henry wasn't sure when his nightmares of Walter had changed from real nightmares to, oh no, Walter is molesting me, porno movie nightmares, which were hardly nightmares at all if one asked his libido. As for Henry's mind, he was actually a little tired of them, really. The man stripped out of his pajama bottoms and got the water going, resting his hands on the sink. Being clean was a blessing he no longer took for granted after weeks of racing through dirt and mud without time for a good bath. Henry lifted his eyes to look in the mirror. What had he become? A lovesick idiot with his only hopes of fulfilling romantic aspirations were in dreams with cornier lines than pay-per-view porno? How the mighty had fallen. Not that he was ever a mighty conqueror in the romance field. Shut up, Henry told his reflection. You're rambling and not making any sense. None of this makes sense. Henry stepped into the tub, chilly water showering over him, and wished he could find a more permanent answer to his nightmare problem. Oh, God. Being dead required being able to entertain yourself and keep from boredom very easily. For the most part, the ghosts of South Ashfield Heights had one another to talk to, and the apartments provided whatever they needed. Henry, on the other hand, being a recluse, had to find ways to occupy his mind. It had been easy enough when he was living alone, writing, drawing, reading, watching movies, or playing games. The first two of these Henry decided were a bad idea. When he wrote or drew, he would let out his thoughts and emotions, and the last thing he needed was for Walter to walk by and find him drawing a bunch of hearts with Townshend plus Sullivan in them. No one needed his horrid love poems either. So he stuck to TV and video games. Henry was currently involved in playing one of his favorite games, Devil May Cry. The brunette was so wrapped up in his melee demon killing spree that he didn't notice the footsteps coming from the kitchen. This is gonna get so wild. What are you doing, Henry? The man jumped, and on screen, his character was beaten repeatedly by Demon's fists. Walter. He glanced up, surprised, then bit his lip. Playing video games. As he walked over, the man chuckled, sitting on the couch beside Henry. This is so terrible, Bob had to leave. I know that. What are you playing? The two looked at one another, and the surprise must have shown on Henry's face. I did spend some time in society. I even went to college. The blushing man looked back to the TV, quickly realizing that Dante was about to die without his help. Henry knew Walter had been an ordinary person, well, not counting his childhood, up until he was 24. It just never occurred to him to think Walter knew what video games were. Devil May Cry. What is it? Walter stared at the screen as Henry mowed down enemies, and then headed for the stairs that had been blocked. Henry was having trouble using his hands to play, his mind to think, and forming words, while all the while there was someone in the back of his head singing about how Walter was sitting right beside him, thigh to thigh. The man's face flushed. You're a demon hunter, trying to get rid of the demons in the castle. Walter was staring curiously at the screen as Dante flew about, shouting catcalls and killing the monsters of hell. So romantic indeed. And why is that? He'd never known Walter was so curious. He was hired to do it. Henry ran Dante around a corner, coming face to face with more enemies. He backtracked to get some space and pulled out his guns. For a while, Walter remained silent, watching as Henry led his character around, and the brunette felt slightly nervous. He hadn't spent much time with the man before, sitting in peaceful quiet, with only the screams and roars of the TV breaking that silence. It was both comforting to be in his presence and alarming. Every cell in his body felt alert and electrified, and Henry couldn't stop staring at the man from his peripheral. This certainly did not aid his game playing, and the game over screen became very familiar very quickly. After about the 9th time Henry had sent Dante to his doom because he was too preoccupied with staring at the light hair on Walter's chin, wondering how it would feel during a kiss. Oh man. He heard Walter speak. "Would you mind if I tried?" "Hold everything." Henry stared as Walter glanced over at him, green eyes wide and somehow innocent, childish. Nodding, Henry handed the controller over. It became dwarfed in larger hands, and seeing his own palm next to these, Henry felt suddenly self-conscious. Walter gently put his fingers around the object, feeling it, caressing the black plastic as his eyes narrowed in examination. Heat flooded to Henry's face and stomach as he wondered what it would be like to be examined like that. What would it be like to be examined like a PlayStation controller, y'all? Gandalf, you're here! Hi, buddy. Hi. You say hi? Hello. Say, I don't know nothing about all this nonsense. Oh, I'm blocking you. I scoot the camera so we can see Kitty, and then maybe if I... There we go. Kind of. Walter looked up from the controller to the screen, bewilderment returning to his gaze. How do I... Realizing his meaning, Henry spoke. Push the X button to make a choice. The circle goes back. The man fell silent as Walter glanced up, brow furrowed. Gandalf. What are you knocking over? You dumb baby. He loves that shelf, and he loves knocking everything over on it. That's why there's very little on it. It's his shelf. So, eyes darting down, Henry scoot closer. I forgot to put it in the right tense. Henry scoot closer and tried to ignore his hammering heart. This one chooses. He pointed to X, where Walter's thumb lay. Circle is this one. It's the back button. He continued to explain the uses of each button, leaning over Walter's leg and left arm. God, it says a lot about my teenage self that this is how, this is so romantic. They're learning to play video games together. It took some experimenting for Walter to truly understand what each action was, but soon enough he was quite adept at killing video game creatures. In fact, the student may have surpassed the master. You gotta go. First you gotta come say hi. Whoop! Hello. Hello. Hi. I don't know what this is, but I'm terrified of it because it's terrible. I know this, somehow. Even my little cat heart knows this is terrible. There you go. There you go. Are you just gonna sit in my lap? Okay, that's cool. Oh my god. Buddy, you're being so cute. You just chill? Okay. His large hands were oddly quick and light with their touches, allowing him to move the character quickly and create deadly combos. Eyes that caught every little detail on the screen. Why am I going into such weird detail about this? Why am I making this like a thing? Walter chose every move with precision and speed. Henry could only watch as the man turned demon killing into an art form. How does he do that? Henry thought, mouth slightly agape. How can he manage to do anything with an eerie grace that doesn't fit his demeanor? It was hard to forget how quietly and softly the man could walk behind you and then pummel your head with a pipe. Walter was finesse, finely tuned madness, and it showed in everything he did. Even playing video games, apparently. Gandalf, this is wild. This is just so wild. Are you just gonna lay down? Now we can't see you. We can't see you anymore. You laid down. I think he's decided I'm warm. Oh, there he goes. Bye, buddy. Henry had never known that... Oh, man! Henry had never known that watching another man play video games could turn him on. But if the growing sensation in his genes was any clue, it was currently happening. Henry, the brunette, jumped, crossing his legs quickly and wincing a little with pain. Walter had paused the game and was now staring at him, eyes narrowed. Are you all right? Oh, God. Fine. He then proceeded to imagine the most horrible things he could think of. His father, having to live at home again, losing his camera, being alone. Eileen, Cynthia, or little Walter getting hurt or dying. Paleness replaced the heated pink on his cheeks, and nails dug into his palm so deep blood was released. Henry gasped when his wrist was grabbed, turning his hand palm up. I don't know why I enjoy hurting, I just hurt these characters so much for no reason. Was there a reason for him to hurt himself here? There was not. I don't even know. Henry gasped. Why does he gasp so much? Jeez. Henry gasped when his wrist was grabbed, turning his hand palm up. What are you doing? Game forgotten, Walter stared at the blood, then turned his gaze to Henry's shocked face. The blonde didn't wait for a reply. With one hand, he pried open the man's palm, the other reaching to grab the other palm. Both had small indents from his nails, blood bubbling up. That had to be freaking he's literally that meme of the guy that's like, I will sit here consumed with lust and terror. Walter laid his fingertips onto these wounds and remained still. The pink color was back in Henry's face. Walter, what are you... Suddenly, something warm poured down Henry's arms, so comforting and invigorating the man's voice died in his throat. It was as if honey had replaced blood in his veins, and was ever so slowly moving from his shoulders down to his hands. As it moved, all the pain and soreness in his muscles melted, all the old wounds seemed to lighten. The bullet wounds in his arms and shoulder ceased throbbing, soothed beneath the warmth. Oh no. Something sparked to life within the center of his chest, and the warmth radiated out so strongly and pure Henry felt white fill his vision. It was safety, security, like being held in your mother's arms. All was well with the world, and sweet tingling comfort was spreading through his chest, through his whole body. In a minute's time, he was like a cat being pet, comfortable and ready to curl up and nap. What was... Henry opened his eyes and saw Walter's hands had moved away, and the little wounds on his palms had disappeared without a trace. Astonished, Henry glanced up. What was that? The warm peace that filled his soul had filled his soul with more comfort than he'd ever had. Oh, geez, where are we even going with this? What is any of this? I healed you. How? He smirked and turned to face the TV once more. The game over screen had appeared again because he'd failed to pause earlier. I'm capable of altering your body to an extent. It's how I treated your wounds when you first came back. Henry watched Walter pick up the controller to try again, still attempting to understand. But how did you... The blonde seemed slightly uncomfortable. Eyes downcast, he muttered, all the sacraments can be controlled by me, body and mind. So can anything within their body, from illnesses to wounds. His eyes lowered, then looked up to Henry. I can control you. Henry's heart froze in his chest as Walter's narrowed eyes glanced down again. I can control you. Those are in italics because he's thinking it, because apparently this is going to be a thing. Oh, geez, why was I such a little kinky weirdo? The man leapt from the couch as if it were on fire. Henry sped through the room, past the kitchen to the door. Henry! The man froze with his hand on the doorknob. Walter was now standing, staring at him. I'm sorry. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing could come out. The only option available to him was to run, and run he did. Henry opened the door and escaped as soon as he could. Henry forced himself to walk and count his steps as he did. He hoped that would keep him from thinking, but even as he counted 56, 57, 58, the voice still echoed in his head, the dry yet sultry tone that melted him always. Oh, jeez. Laughter came to his ears as Henry finally slowed his breakneck speed. The man looked up and felt a smile tug at his lips. Cynthia, Eileen, little Walter, and to Henry's surprise, Richard were sitting together on a hill in the woods of Silent Hill. I know it's not Richard in the picture, but I couldn't resist this family photo. Since the darkness had departed, the area had lightened some, though monsters still haunted it at night. For a moment, a bit of sunlight trickled through the dark sky, and a soft, damp breeze floated over the lake. Who wants cake? Eileen lifted the container, a big grin lighting her face as little Walter looked up and gasped. Ooh, can I? Course you can, sweetie. And what about you, handsome? Cynthia, smiling, turned to Richard, who gave a snort. I'm not a sweets kind of guy. Neither woman seemed surprised by that, smirking at one another. Let me guess, you enjoy sour candy and nights home alone, the woman joked. If you change candy to meat and potatoes, the man smirked as young Walter began digging into his dessert. Henry stared at the group a good 10 feet away, slightly hidden beneath the trees. 10 feet's not that far. 10 feet is like, they would have heard him there. That's, okay. They seemed content. Eileen was comfortable in her motherly role, already wiping chocolate from Walter's cheek. The boy, having dove into his treat rather quickly, had brighter eyes than Henry had seen on him before. Cynthia joked and flirted with Richard, and the older jaded man took the chance to grumble about kids these days. They seem so peaceful, Henry thought with a smile. Why am I here? He'd already taken one step back when suddenly Eileen glanced up and caught sight of him. Hey, Henry, she waved as the man winced. Come on over. Forcing his feet to change direction, Henry approached them, but stayed a few feet from the checkered blanket. Eileen gestured to the cake. Want to join us? No thanks, he muttered, eyes downcast. Oh, come on, stop lurking over there and have some fun, Cynthia insisted, but Henry's feet were already backtracking him towards the woods. The woman frowned darkly, arms on her hips. Why'd you come all the way out here just to leave, huh? Why did he? What is this plot? Eileen put a hand on her arm. He's just tired. We'll see him later. She nodded to him as he came nearer to the woods, seeming to understand Henry's need to escape. The man's heart throbbed. Her acceptance only made the pain worsen. Why do you put up with me? But he kept moving. Then, with a grunt, Richard stood. Wait up, kid. We need to talk. Surprised, Henry found he stopped, watching as the older man walked through the grass. He stopped by the edge of the woods, hands in his pocket, eyes grimmed. Sorry about last time. A hand came up behind his head as he sighed. What is he doing? Henry's brow moved up a little, the only physical sign he was confused. The other cursed and threw his arms down. Look, about a week ago, these guys approached me. Henry's mood became very serious. He remembered that time as he'd overheard it. Weirdos in cloaks. Jimmy Stone and George Roston. Richard's eyebrows flew up. You know 'em? The first and sixth of Walter's victims. Richard's face turned a bit red and at the mention of the killer, but he kept his cool. Yeah, they came to me asking if I'd go into the apartment and get them something. Talking all this shit about bringing down the sun, restoring order. I didn't give a damn, I told him. Still don't give a damn. The balding man was looking to the side at the ground, voice gravelly. But, well, you did your damnedest to protect her. He nodded to Eileen. She's a sweetheart. Anybody willing to go through what you did to try and save her is a decent man. Richard met his eyes. Thought I'd give you a heads up about it. Walter can go to hell for all I care. Another curse, and he shrugged, turning away and grumbling. Thanks, Richard. The information had been nothing new, but the fact that Richard had been willing to help, that meant something. Warmth flooded Henry's heart, and he found the will to smile. The other stared for a moment before nodding. Yeah. See you around. Henry nodded as Richard waved and returned to the group. Meanwhile, the brunette remained fixated on the other's back as he sat next to young Walter, the boy who he had terrified during his life. They seemed at ease with one another now, Walter looking up and smiling as Richard approached. The man grinned wearily, patting the boy's back as he finally accepted the earlier offer of cake. I misjudged him. Leaves crunched beneath his feet as Henry walked into the woods. I really have to remember that every hot-headed man isn't my father. Man, this is, there's just a whirlwind. This is a wild train wreck. Oh, man. Oh, my God. Okay. For the next hour, Henry was led around Silent Hill Woods more by his thoughts than his feet. Emotions, memories, dreams, and worries intertwined as he walked it out, letting each drift away with every step forward. This is almost poetic. Hatred and love left him hand in hand as he sighed into the cold lake winds, empty of thoughts, intently listening to the roll of the waves on the shore and the drifting breeze through the trees. Henry only stopped when he came to a fence. The photographer in him came alive at the beautiful sight of twilight above Toluca Lake, the waters shimmering a deep purplish navy, the sky an odd mix of pale blue and black. Every last touch of sunlight went running across its surface like fairies dancing their last, slowing only to shut their eyes one last time. What is this? When night truly had fallen upon the world, Henry hoisted his heavy eyes to the sky. Oh, God. Every star shone on the pure black background, brighter and stronger than they'd ever been. Thousands upon thousands looked down upon Henry as he shed a single tear. This is the most overly dramatic shit. I'm so depressed here. It's so emo. It's a nice night to be heartbroken. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hi, Bob. Are you coming back to comfort me? This is terrible. When Henry finally dragged himself back home, he was shocked to find the door to his apartment only opened halfway. Confused, he leaned in to see the obstruction, and his jaw dropped. There was a huge bookcase running along his entire wall from the door, around the TV, the window, and the couch. It was as tall as the room and stocked full of all kinds of video games. Walter stood up when Henry entered. His green eyes had shed their weight. What does that mean? He lost weight in his eyeballs? Oh my god. Hello, Henry, the man began before turning to the bookshelf. The brunette approached slowly, wide eyes scanning the plethora of games, old and new. Fun to imagine what's considered new at this point in history. GoldenEye, Final Fantasy VII, Spyro the Dragon, Soul Calibur 3, Mortal Kombat, Harvest Moon, Kingdom Hearts, Dark Cloud. Oh, good God. A Lord of the Rings game? Snatching it from the shelf, Henry read the back in awe, and a small smile came to him. Mother provided this. I grew tired of the other one and wanted to try something else. Walter was kneeling to look at the bottom shelf, his expression just as whimsical as his friend's. Henry nodded, tucking the loader game under his arm and hastily going back to the shelf. This is incredible, he murmured, mouth dry. This kind of collection probably doesn't exist anywhere. The two spent a good hour just looking at the wondrous collection, practically drooling at the mouth. Walter didn't quite have Henry's complete shock, but he seemed just as enthused. Finally, at one point, the man stood, holding his game of choice carefully with both hands. When he heard Walter walking away, Henry turned to see him kneel by the TV. The blonde remained still for a moment. Henry. The brunette walked over and saw the problem. This part's actually kind of cute. Walter was holding a Nintendo 64 cartridge carefully in his hands, as if it might break with the smallest touch, and he was staring at the PlayStation 2 with a slight frown. As he knelt by the man, Henry couldn't keep from chuckling. It's for a different system, he explained to the man, who seemed to understand. Do you think you could ask your mother for a Nintendo 64? Even as the words left his mouth, Henry watched Walter close his eyes and bring the idea to life. A bit of light streamed into the room. The light began to have edges and a shape, and in a moment, a Nintendo 64 came to life right before their eyes. I haven't seen one of these in years. He grinned at it a little, reaching out to touch the oddly shaped controller. Walter examined the device, looking for a way to put in the game, and then went the safe way and held it out for Henry. Henry took the game, flipped it over to see the cover. Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. His lips turned up in a soft smile. As he placed it in the console, with Walter's eyes watching carefully, he asked, "Why this one?" The blonde glanced away, standing with controller in hand. Then he shrugged. Henry stared at him as he sat down, eyes down. Okay, good job. The cover seemed nice, he finally admitted, and the title mentioned music. I thought it might be less violent. Realization dawned, and Henry was torn between crying and smiling. Instead, he sat by Walter on the couch. Yeah, Zelda's got a little violence in it, but it's a lot less than Devil May Cry. He patted the man's shoulder, shocked he wasn't fainting from doing so. He could feel Walter's immense body heat, even through the thick jacket. Zelda's more of a exploration, puzzle-solving game. As the opening scene of the hero riding his horse through a large green field appeared, Walter smiled. I like that. The next morning, Henry found Walter perusing his bookshelf. The normal one. The huge video game shelf was gone for the moment. The blonde turned to him, blonde hair unkempt and falling all over his shimmering eyes. Why are his eyes always doing everything? Mouth slightly parted and brow furrowed, looking very much lost. Henry almost lost hold of his coffee cup. Without having to be asked, Henry approached and scanned the novels. He then reached up to the almost highest shelf. He couldn't quite reach it, of frickin' course. Without having to be asked, Walter stood behind him and reached up, his taller form easily overtaking Henry's. Heat flooded the shorter man, and it wasn't entirely from the human furnace behind him. That one, the brunette directed, almost regretting it as Walter took hold of the book and stepped away. Henry turned to see him examining the title and the cover with curiosity. Interview with a vampire? He wondered. Oh, God. A quizzical eyebrow cocked. So it's about killing. His eyes darkened at the thought. Henry shook his head. More like redemption from killing. The man devoured the whole Anne Rice series in a week. Oh, that's horrible. Put that in your brains, y'all. Walter Sullivan read all the Anne Rice. All of it. Henry found each day that Walter needed something else to do, and for the most part turned to Henry for help. On any given day, the two could be found watching a movie or playing a game together, or one was reading while the other did something else. Sometimes Walter remained in the storage room doing who knew what, but more often than not, Walter was in the other parts of the apartment more and more. Soon Henry realized there was a bit of a hole in the lives of 302's tenants. Though they'd become much friendlier and the tension in their conversations had somewhat lessened, there were still rough patches. Part of that, Henry thought, came from a lack of what his mother would call family time, which is why Henry found himself in the kitchen at 6 o'clock at night with his sleeves rolled up, an array of colorful food before him, sliced up peppers on the cutting board with black olives and mushrooms. He began adding handfuls to his sauce, which already had meatballs and seasoning. Then the water started boiling, so he moved to dump in the pasta. With his free hand, he opened the oven and glanced in. His green beans were doing fine. It shut on its own as he let it go, turning back to the vegetables, only to bump into a large blue obstacle. This is definitely slice of life sitcom stuff right now, y'all. Oh my God. Color rushed to Henry's face. Walter was examining a piece of pepper, holding it with a confused glance. Henry snatched it back. You can't touch them without washing your hands, he explained, throwing away the contaminated piece. When he turned back, Walter was smiling. Germs hardly matter when you're dead, he retorted, but Henry just shrugged. Walter was still in his way, heartbeat hammering. He made up his mind. The man pressed his side against Walter's, trying to bump him out of the way. It probably only worked because Walter was surprised, otherwise the bigger man could have simply planted his feet. Henry returned to mixing his ingredients as Walter stared, dumbfounded. A timer went off. Henry glanced over to the toaster. He was about to approach it when Walter beat him to it, pulling open the tray. Bread's done, he stated. Henry rushed to his side. Careful, that's hot. He grabbed Walter's hand and pulled it back, spilling the tray and bread onto the counter. The man ignored it, immediately pulling Walter over to the sink, turning the water on cold. He shoved the hand under it. But after a moment, Henry stared in shock to see no red marks on Walter's fingers. His stunned gaze lifted to Walter's, who was smiling. Don't worry, Henry. Mother won't hurt me. Oh, of course not. Red flushed his face again, this time from embarrassment, as he slowly let the hand go and turned the water off. When he managed to glance back up, Walter was smirking. Just set the table, he seethed, turning back to his dish. That was when Walter let out a laugh. It stopped his footsteps and his heart, the freedom and happiness in that sound. Henry had heard Walter chuckle, even laugh a little, but this was a real laugh. It was just as deep and husky as his other laughs, but Henry found he liked it best. Dinner prepared, Henry pulled out plates as Walter filled 2 glasses with water. Henry had to instruct him on how to properly set a table. We're seeing this once again, this bit from last time where this is how my family always ate because my dad was really old-fashioned. Salad fork on the outside, the small fork, he said. Big fork next, knife on the right, blade facing in, drink on the right corner. Walter did as he was told. How do you know this? The blonde asked as he took the glasses to the table. Henry paused in the middle of pulling the green beans out of the oven. Walter noticed the hesitation. My family, we ate dinner like this every night, he muttered. Henry shook his head and kept moving, silence returning to his demeanor. The two sat at the counter, Walter on the right corner, Henry on the part with the living room. Color flooded Henry's face as he second-guessed himself. What am I doing? He heard the clink of metal against teeth and turned to see Walter was digging in. The shock must have shown on his face because Walter looked up and smiled. Also, he must have knocked out his goddamn teeth if they heard a sound like frickin'... Oh. It's good, he set the fork down. Why did you do this? Henry turned away, eyes down, and shrugged. Eyes were burning into the side of his head. When he managed to look up again, he saw Walter staring, arms crossed, with smug confidence in his eyes Henry hadn't seen in a while. If this living together thing will work, you have to talk, Henry. The man put his arms on the counter. Only a foot or so away, Henry was as intimidated by his huge form now as he was when they first fought. The man's smirk grew when he shrugged. I suppose, since my powers allow me to, I could always look in your head. Henry's eyes grew wide at the implication. No! Walter's smirk disappeared, replaced by concern as Henry's hand shook slightly. He shook his head. No, I'll talk. Brow furrowed, Walter simply nodded. All right, Henry. He turned away. I didn't mean... Henry glanced up and realized he'd probably overreacted a little. He was just teasing. No, He saw the defeated look on Walter's face and sadness choked his throat. Sorry. He too glanced away. The rest of the dinner was eaten in silence. Most of their progress had halted at that point as Henry cursed his stupid reaction and could only watch as Walter went about the usual routine with a little less happiness. Henry could tell the difference. Usually, Walter on a good day looked at everything with a curious and wondrous eye and had a sharp wit. Oh, good God. But now, after their argument from the day before, he was quiet, not really doing anything. How do I fix this? Oh, jeez. How do I fix this? This thing that I cursed us all with. How do I fix this? It was getting close to dinner time again when Henry finally got an idea. He left room 302 and went next door, glad to see that Eileen was currently at home. Hey, Henry. Eileen walked over and hugged him tight, and he returned it with exuberance. The next hug, which included Cynthia, draping her body on him, not so much. I was looking for Walter, the little one, he explained. He found the boy putting more puzzles together in the living room. Henry! Little Walter grinned, leaping up to hug him. Henry couldn't help but smile and kneel to embrace him. How are you? Having fun? The boy nodded happily, and for a moment Henry's heart swelled at the thought that all the sacrifices were worth it. Oh, God. The kid's happy. He'll never have to suffer the way his counterpart did. Walter's eyes were fixed curiously on the bulge in Henry's jacket, which made the man smile. I have a present. The child beamed. But first, can you answer a question for me? Uh-huh. Excited now, he swung his arms back and forth as he waited. What is it? What's your favorite food? Henry asked. The child seemed surprised. If you could have anything, what would you have? The child put his pudgy hands together in thought, a funny look on his face. It took a minute or two, but finally the boy grinned and shouted, Grilled cheese, it's my absolute favorite. Henry smiled and opened his jacket to reveal another Nintendo 64, with Ocarina of Time already in it, watching as young Walter's eyes lit up. As he helped the boy set it up, he thought, grilled cheese it is, then. That night, when making the meal, Henry hesitated for a moment. Grilled cheese was a very childish food. Maybe Walter had grown out of it. But then Henry realized he was still rather childish, having been denied the chance to be during his youth. So he went for it. Oh, God. 10 minutes later, with 4 sandwiches done, 2 on each plate, Henry knocked on Walter's door with his foot. It took a minute, but he finally heard a gruff, "Come in." Nerves finally showing themselves, Henry felt his throat dry as he shoved the door open. Hope this works. Walter was sitting at his desk, looking over something. He turned when Henry came in, eyes falling on the sandwiches and widening slightly. Just realized, you know how great it would be if you had this frickin' apartment and you could just make what video game stuff you wanted? You could make as many copies of Haunting Ground as you wanted and just sell them on eBay and be a millionaire. Just make all the old rich games, bring everything back. It'd be a miracle. I want this apartment now. And if I had to kill 21 people to do it, I'd do it. Nervous, Henry gulped and glanced down. He finally extended one of the plates to Walter, feeling like a foolish child looking for approval. Nothing seemed to happen for a while. Then finally, Walter took it. He snapped up to see Walter eyeing it quizzically before turning to eye Henry. Both were quiet for a moment. Why? Henry felt his throat tighten. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. Walter slowly nodded, but then eyed the food again. But why this? Had he made a mistake? No, but Walter's sharp eyes seemed to sense there was more to the peace offering than just food. Henry felt his mouth freeze up. Walter's burning gaze fell on him again. The man remembered their conversation from yesterday and finally forced himself to say something. Little Walter told me this was his favorite. Walter's eyes widened as he looked at the sandwich. I suppose at one time it might have been. Henry's stomach twisted. And now? He slowly shrugged. I don't really think of that now. He set the plate on the desk. I'm very different from my younger self. Henry noticed his dark look. You don't like him much, do you? He asked, leaning against a nearby wall, food untouched. I guess he's just holding it. He's just holding it. Oh, God. I suppose... No, I don't. Though I suppose you overheard that. Foolish, weak, naive. Henry's eyes were huge and his face flooded red. Walter chuckled, a deadly smirk on his face. Aw, thank you, Daniel. I just noticed. I'm so distracted by the horribleness. Thank you. Oh, man. You didn't think I'd notice your choice of words. I'm not unintelligent, Henry. He leaned forward, chin on his hands. Why were you listening? Remember from the last chapter, he, overheard him doing some... I don't know. I've blocked it all from my memory. The flustered man turned away. Henry... A spark of fire raced up his spine. Oh, Jesus. And the man almost groaned when Walter said his name. Low and slow. Oh, my God. Remember yesterday? Yeah, I remember, he muttered. Finally, prepared to be completely mortified, he turned back to Walter. You guys weren't talking about me? Walter's eyebrows flew up. About you? Slowly, the brunette nodded, his hands shaking. I thought that was me, and Eileen mentioned me, so... Henry. His nervous babbling ended at the darker tone, which sent another dirty chill through Henry's lecherous body. What I said wasn't about you, and you shouldn't have eavesdropped. You only caught part of the conversation, one not meant for you. The same way my thoughts aren't for you. Henry was shocked to find he was being defiant. Walter saw the look in his eyes and held up his hands. You're right. I won't pry. Henry wasn't sure, but he supposed Walter was going to use it as a way to make Henry open up. Though why he'd bother, the man didn't know. The two fell silent, both of their meals entirely untouched. Is that why you're crying? Shocked. Or why you were crying, sorry. When was he crying? I don't remember. Shocked, Henry dropped his plate. Which, again, he's just been holding this plate of grilled cheese during this conversation, and now he's so surprised he just dropped... Okay. Which shattered on the floor, because these people don't use Corel. The man fell to the ground, busying himself, picking up shards, trying not to think of what he'd heard. His whole body trembled, mind reeling with the idea that the man knew he'd been crying himself to sleep in the dark. Oh man, that's sad. That was a kind of weakness Henry didn't share with others. Two boots came into his vision as Walter knelt in front of him. Henry, stop. Two hands came over his wrists. Keep doing that and you'll cut yourself. That was probably true. Even now, his hands were shaking uncontrollably. They stayed silent next to each other as Walter let his hands go. Yes. Walter nodded, understanding, and with a wave of his hand, the pieces of the plate suddenly faded, turning to glittering dust and floating into the air where they vanished. A brand new plate held Henry's dinner. Why? Walter finally murmured, voice low and thick with something. Pain, confusion. Why cry because of my words? He lifted his gaze to look at Henry, who was pointedly avoiding looking back. Why does my opinion matter? What is this? The brunette finally shouted. You can ask whatever you want and I have to answer, because if you don't get your way, you'll just find out by digging into my head? The man was crying again, backed into a corner, fearful that if pushed farther, his dark secret would be brought to light. Well, I don't have to say anything. Shoulders shaking, Henry kept his head down, eyes shut tight, waiting for the inevitable moment when Walter would look inside his head and find out, and turn away forever. What would the reaction be? Disgust at his unmanly desires? Laughter and ridicule? Or would he simply walk away? A hand came down onto his trembling shoulder. Henry. The man kept his head down. Look at me. He thought, you can't order me to do whatever you want. But a gentle hand came under his chin, lifting his face. The look on Walter surprised him. The murderer seemed almost forlorn. You're right, and I'm sorry. So what do we do? Walter smiled, and the hand went from his chin to his shoulder. For every question you answer, I answer one of yours, and if you don't want to, then don't. Is that all right? Finally, Henry nodded slowly. I can't answer that one. Walter nodded before he could finish, his right hand moving up and down Henry's shoulder in a comforting motion. Where did this man learn how to comfort in between killing people? But he had to admit Walter was doing well. He was still trembling, but his breathing was slowing down and he was feeling a bit better. At least tell me why you're crying now. Walter smiled when Henry let out a choked laugh. I really have no idea. He sobbed, clutching his chest, and next he knew, his entire body was being cradled in an embrace, head resting on a blue jacket. Don't you love that all this is happening and there's still a grilled cheese sandwich on the screen? I had no idea what to do for this part. I was just like, okay, I don't know. Why is he comforting me? How? Henry tried to equate what he knew of Walter before and what he was seeing now, and it didn't fit. I don't understand. Why would he care if I'm crying? For a good 10 minutes, they sat there, Henry in Walter's lap, until Henry's sobs became sniffles. When he'd mostly regained control of himself, Henry glanced up to Walter's confused face. Never once when I was hunting you. I never saw you cry, the man whispered. You never shed a tear. Henry gave a smirk. Maybe I locked it all up and it's finally coming out. He glanced away, half of him wanting to get out of the embrace, the other wishing to snuggle as close as he could. I worry. Surprised, Henry glanced up. Walter's brow was brought together, mouth slightly open. I'm afraid of what I did, the damage I caused. The others, I've seen it in them. They have nightmares. Sometimes they break down and comfort one another. Sharp noises, footsteps, a shadow on the wall puts them on alert. Most of them carry a weapon on them. Walter was looking away now. I know I broke them. Henry hadn't heard this much out of Walter ever. I killed them. It was all for Mother, and it was worth it, but I took 21 lives. 21 people who will never see their mothers again. Walter's gaze hardened. I have to do what I can to protect them. They are my responsibility now. Especially you, Henry. I want to protect you. Choking up again, Henry's eyes widened. What was he supposed to say to that? I worry about you because you don't do the things they do. You've been holding on to that pain. I want you to let it go, Walter told him. That's why I asked you to speak to me. I wasn't trying to be intrusive. I want to help. Trying to take it all in, Henry finally found the strength to nod. Thanks. One last sniffle, a wipe at his eyes, and he got up. Both men stood. Henry stumbled a little, but a hand on his back caught him. Silence overtook them both again. Henry glanced down at the plate on the floor. Kneeling, he picked up his dinner and turned towards Walter. The man approached the desk, sitting in his chair with his plate in front of him. Henry dragged a box over and used it as a stool, sitting with him to eat. Neither spoke a word the whole meal, but their connection had never been stronger. Oh, God, this is so much. This is so much. Why does Walter remind me of Al from Al's Moving Castle? You know, you're not wrong. Oh, God. The question routine began the next day. Most of the inquiries were innocent things. What's your favorite book? And Walter had an easier time coming up with things than Henry did. For every 5 of Walter's curious questions, Henry had 1 question answered. But he didn't mind. He was grateful for Walter's treatment of him the night before. He figured the blonde had been right. He had been carrying a lot of fear and pain from the time before he died, and letting some of it go felt refreshing. The weight on his back had lightened, and there was a bit more strength behind his smile. Walter seemed to have noticed and was in a better mood than he'd been in a week. Henry hadn't quite figured the man out. He didn't regret the sacraments. He felt they were necessary, but he clearly felt guilty about them and somehow wanted to make up for the lives he'd taken by taking care of their ghosts in the afterlife, and Henry apparently was the most important of these. Walter had taken to calling him my receiver, which did nothing to calm the butterflies in Henry's stomach. I can actually see where I'm building to the plot that comes in the next chapter. What do you know? I knew how to plot. Honestly, if I remember right, I continued this story long after I had started it, and I continued it into part of college, I think, and it started to pick up, like, a little more quality towards the end. We may be turning that point. Walter had become very talkative and answered Henry's questions happily. There was more life in him than there'd ever been, and Henry liked the change. He was starting to understand the blonde more. For instance, when he was irritated or frustrated, he had a bit of an angry pout. His eyebrows would squeeze together so tight they almost became one, and his mouth would scrunch up as he fussed with whatever was bothering him. He smirked more than he smiled, but the rare smile that graced his face made him look younger than he ever had. The things that made him smile were rare. Henry saw it most when he was reading or relaxed. And while Walter enjoyed games, they did not relax him. In fact, he was very competitive. The two had tried a few racing and fighting games, and Henry found himself entirely outmatched. Walter was a quick learner, and he wasn't the type to let go of victory easily. Whenever he won, that smirk would spread across his face, a smug light in his eyes, and Henry was torn between the warm fire in his gut and wanting to hit the man. Henry, I think you need to be checked for, worms or something, because there's always something going on in your gut. Henry had come to refer to the man as his guard dog. Walter was overprotective and very much like a loyal dog in that protection. Where there was a threat, which could be a creature from the outside or just Henry moping, Walter would grimace, brow furrowed with a slight curl of his lips. He'd be silent, but the blaze in his eyes was all the threat he needed. It was the most frightening thing Henry'd ever seen, and it always shocked him it was in reaction to protecting him. Henry had never had anyone protect him at all. Where this streak had suddenly come from, Henry wasn't sure, but he knew it had changed that night. Walter had suddenly stopped hiding and sulking off instead of backing away from the world. He attempted to be around Henry more. The brunette knew what a leap it was, so in return he tried to be as open as he could. It was a hard transition for them both, and more awkward more times than not, but they were trying. He thought perhaps this was as close to knowing the normal Walter that he'd ever get. It's nice, but it's strange. Eileen and Cynthia were seated on the couch in room 303, both staring knowingly at the confused brunette on the other side of the table. You really don't know why he's acting this way. Cynthia grinned and wiggled her eyebrows. Henry shook his head with a snort. Come on, you think everything's about sex. Everything is about sex. And love, if you're lucky, which I think you are. She hinted, grinning happily and clapping her hands together. Oh, it's so cute. Is it? Is it? This is the man that killed you with a knife. Oh, man. It's even cuter that neither of them had figured it out. $10 on Walter making the first move. Oh, I don't know. I've got faith in Henry. You know, by the same logic you're using to say Walter likes me, I could say the two of you are together, Henry stammered, waving his hand at the two women. They both blinked and laughed. Oh, wow, I didn't do the two of them. That's sad. Apparently. Oh, I'd drive her nuts the first day, Cynthia laughed. Not to mention our friend here already has someone. It was Eileen's turn to become bright pink. Who are you talking about? Henry leaned forward, curious, staring at Eileen's face, which she attempted to cover with her hands as she groaned. A devious look came over the woman's face. Eileen likes A hand came over her mouth as Eileen grimaced, but it was too late. Oh, my younger self. Not repressed enough that I couldn't write gay men, but still repressed enough that I couldn't pair the two beautiful women that should obviously be together. I did write fanfic about them in college. I remember that. Richard, grinning at the mortification on Eileen's face, Henry found it was nice to turn the tables. It's nothing. Right. An hour later, he left with a smile on his face. It had been fun and relaxing, telling the girls his thoughts, and left him feeling better. Wait a minute. Henry stopped, looking at his surroundings as his eyes raced. Heart raced. Why am I saying his eyes? Shit. Henry backed up, head flying round. Oh, shit. The world had changed. As the man's flustered footsteps echoed on grates and metal, his horrified eyes took in the bleeding walls. His ears could hear distant wails and screams, mechanic churning and metallic grinding. It was blisteringly hot, and the door Henry had come out of was gone. There was no way out. Gasping, Henry tried to think straight as he balled his fists. Shink! Henry froze. What was that noise? Shink? Heart hammering in his chest, sweat pouring down his brow, Henry slowly turned towards the noise, which was coming from far down the hall. Shink! Fear overtaking him, the man turned to run, only to find someone in his way. They weren't blocking his path, no. They were hanging above him. It was humanoid in appearance, but Henry knew it had long since ceased being such. No eyes, no nose, only a mouth was on its face, and large circular markings covered its shoulders. Uh-oh, I hear someone coming! You can come on out. Sorry it's taking so long. I thought we'd be done by now. We're at a good pausing point. Lola! Oh, let her come there. Let me have my Lola. Hi, baby. Oh my goodness, hello. And Bob. Hey, Bob. Oh my goodness, Lola. Oh, there you go. Hi, Lola. Uh-oh. Are we gonna have an issue? Hey, baby. Oh, I don't want kisses. I don't want them. No. Don't do that. Oh, you say hi? You look at camera? Oh my goodness. No. I'm actually very shocked that you're being so good, Bob. Bob does not like Lola. Usually when they get this close, Lola gets a smack. Isn't that right, Lola? You see? Hi. All right, we go give a Lola to the... You need to go outside? Put your... Ow. Stop that. All right, we will be right back. Stop licking me. All right, we're right at the end. Where was I? No eyes, no nose, only a mouth on its face, and large circular marks covered its shoulders. The thing was crawling across the ceiling towards him as Henry began backing away. But his back hit something and Henry's throat choked up. Screaming, he leapt away and spun around to face his next attacker. It was huge, taller than Walter and about as broad, built thick with muscle. It only wore a robe around its waist and a strange triangular helmet on its head. In its hand was an enormous rusted blade covered in blood. Henry's frightened eyes fell upon it and gasps caught in his throat. He had seen the tool of his death. Woo! Hello! Welcome to the set of the worst fanfic you've ever been in. Hello, Pyramid Head. Hello, Voltaire. The thing on the ceiling and the monster before him both stopped moving as Henry fell to the floor, shivering. Neither seemed to be paying him any attention. Suddenly oh my god, I remember what happened here. Oh no. Suddenly a rumbling voice struck the air, deep and horrifying, echoing out from the helmet. But it was almost like it was in his head, surrounding and choking him. This is the one? The one on the ceiling dropped to the floor with a heavy whoomp, startling Henry. He began hyperventilating as they spoke. The other creature's voice was just as dark, but perhaps more twisted, more violent. Yes, the child might not look it, but he was chosen. The helmet seemed to turn towards him, and Henry noticed some sort of eye cover on it. Beneath it, he could see a yellow blazing eye, almost pupilless, staring intently at him. It was all he could do not to faint. Something about these creatures was much more powerful than any of the ones he'd faced before. He seems weak. Look how he trembles. The one on Henry's left knelt by him, and he jumped, scooting away. I have seen his bravery. A raspy, choked noise came from him that might have been a laugh. Though you are right, he is not a fighter. Yet the mother chose him. The helmeted one moved his blade in front of him, and Henry let out a choked gasp, but all the creature did was embed it in the ground. Perhaps she felt he was better suited to the task. Perhaps. I don't ask. I only obey. A cold hand suddenly grasped his shoulder, and Henry screamed, trying to back away. "Leave me alone!" 2 strong arms came under his shoulders, and he was hoisted up. Next he knew, the poor man was being held against the smooth side of the blade, arms above his head tied to the handle. How did this get so freaky so fast? What does the mother command? the taller one asked. A trade. He must take something of mine, and I something of his. It can be anything. The eyeless face almost seemed to be looking him over, and for all Henry knew, the thing could see him. More frightened than he'd been since his death, the man closed his eyes and focused on breathing. Take his eyes. So startled by the proclamation, Henry's eyes flew wide and his breath left him. He is an artist, fool. That would be the cruelest. The thing shook its head, moving closer to Henry. I have a much better idea. Fear squeezed Henry's guts. No, please. Must you always be so perverse? The helmet one seemed to sigh as two freezing hands came to Henry's hip bones. Says the rapist. It was part of the man's punishment. One deed against all else I have done smears my reputation. 2 deeds. You forgot the creature in the stairwell. Now we've got Voltaire Pyramid Head buddy cop comedy? Jeez. Tears pouring down his cheeks, Henry shook his head violently. No, please. Would you like it better if I looked like this? Suddenly the creature in front of him had the appearance of Walter, but it was appearance only. It was still as cold as it had been before. Still, the image of his face coming closer was almost... Don't. The being just smirked, and then its lips descended on his. It was bitterly cold, like a dead man's flesh, sending waves of revulsion through the brunette. But then something burning hot touched him, so hot it was almost scalding. A tongue brutally forced its way into his mouth, touching with forceful caresses. Then came sharp teeth as teeth drew blood from his tongue. Something inside him compelled. Was a voice whispering to him to do the same. He bit the tongue and hot liquid poured into his throat. What is happening? Henry hadn't thought he'd bitten hard, but there was more blood than usual. It was over in a flash, the wound on his tongue gone, the blood down his throat. Tired, lidded eyes looked up at the creature that once again looked like itself and seemed smug. The helmeted one seemed incredulous. That is all? We've done it. We've traded blood. What did you think I meant? The thing smirked, and it was more frightening since a bit of its sharp teeth showed through. You're despicable. But coming from the monster, it seemed a compliment. The ropes on Henry's arms came off, and he was hoisted into the air by strong arms. No, he whispered breathlessly, afraid, but instead a large palm came over his forehead. Lightly, the cold thing remained there, and when the monster lowered him, Henry's eyes were shut. What did you do? Eased his pain and placed something for the future. I do not want this to fail, for there is only one chance, the thing explained. Kneeling, it set Henry on the floor gently, just as a siren began going off in the distance. The dark and bloody world around them began to fade. It is odd to see such a kind heart here, the helmet thing commented, staring down at Henry's peaceful face in something close to adulation. Being around the innocent feels much lighter. Whatever you say, Judge. The other laughed as the two began fading away. I will take a deliciously guilty man any day. Then they were gone. When Henry woke up, he was in bed. His body felt heavier than before. How are you feeling? Walter's voice came from his left, but the man was too tired to turn his head. Like I'm seasick, he muttered darkly with a groan. What happened? I was hoping you'd tell me. A blonde head came into view, eyes darkened, promising pain to whoever had put Henry in such a state. The brunette couldn't help him. I don't remember. What? What's going on? Oh my god. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. There is a comment. There is a author's note. For those who don't know, this is part 4 of my Walter and Henry one-shot series, which I haven't given a title yet. The other 3 parts are, and then I name them. I'm not telling you. Sorry this one took so much longer to put out. I was on vacation for a week, and when I came back, I struggled to put what I wanted into words. This chapter was probably the hardest for me, because it introduced some new stuff. We've seen Henry fighting with his love for Walter. Now we see him fighting desire too. Oh, and the plot thinkins. Soon it'll all turn into something, and only I know. There will be many chapters of this, but the current arc, if you will, may soon draw to a close. Also, if there's anyone who'd like to be a beta for the next chapter, I would be very grateful. Send me a message if you're willing. I'm dead. I'm dead inside. This is all terrible. This is, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot about the part where I did the weird kinky monster stuff. Can't believe I repressed that memory. Oh god, but we've lived. We've survived another episode of Fanfic Friday. Thank you all for joining me. I tried streaming this on the second channel, but just, nobody gets the notifs or something. I don't know. Most people are still subscribed over here. So if you like Fanfic Friday and you want to participate, join the second channel. It's going to host this video once we're done streaming here. I'll move it later. Link in the description. And we'll do another one of these in a week or 2 weeks, depending on when I finish it. Thanks for watching, and thank you to our members like Daniel and Jeff, and y'all, you're amazing. Thank you for supporting me, even with the weird shit that I make. I swear it won't be, well, no, okay, there's probably still more cringy stuff to come. Oh god, I forgot about the weird monster thing, and I'm pretty sure more that's, yeah, I just get worse. Listen, I liked monsters. It's just gonna get worse. So, I really think that's all the, notification stuff I need to say. So follow that second channel, join the Discord. I'm going to go drown in my feelings and use my magical pyramid head powers to erase this from my memory. I hope you all do the same. I'll see you next time.